Good evening. This upcoming Shabbos is Shabbos Mevorachim HaChodesh Oder Sheni, and it's Parsha Shkolim, and Parsha Shkolim is the first the first letter of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, because there's four parshios: Shkolim, Zohar, Parah, and Chodesh, and each one is under the umbrella of a different letter of the Shem Havaya, and Parsha Shkolim, being the first parsha, comes out under the Yud. Now, two of the parshas are D'Rabbanan. Shkolim, the first, and the last, HaChodesh. Zohar, according to everyone, is D'Oraisa. And that's why everyone goes, and all the women go, everyone to listen, because that's the one parsha, one kriya of the year that's, according to everyone, a D'Oraisa. Parah is a suffix D'Oraisa. Some Rishonim hold it is D'Oraisa, some hold not. But since it's a suffix D'Oraisa, so certainly everyone should make sure to hear it, men and women also, Parshas Parah. Now, we know that D'Oraisa has a higher status than a D'Rabbanan. If you had one matzah on Pesach, and you had to have the Kazayas matzah the first night or the second night, lahalacha, you'd have to eat it the first night, because that's the D'Oraisa, b'chamisha asar yom lachodesh. But there are others who point out that every D'Rabbanan is a D'Oraisa, because the pasuk says in Devarim, Lo Sasur, that every Yid has to be careful to watch and listen to and do the words of the Rabbanan. So really, when a person is Makayim a Rabbanan, he's being Makayim a D'Oraisa of Lo Sasur by listening to it, and then the D'Rabbanan. So in that sense, not in halacha. Nor halacha, like I said, you have to take the matzah the first night of Pesach. That is the pure D'Oraisa. But in Kabbalah, in Inyanim, which are higher, it's true. Lo Sasur is a D'Oraisa that you have to listen, plus the D'Rabbanan of what they said. So in a sense, it's bigger in that avenue than even the first night. And that's why many tzaddikim said that they do not want to move to Eretz Yisrael, even though they were dying to move to Eretz Yisrael, because they didn't want to give up the second Seder, which in Eretz Yisrael they don't have, because it's a D'Oraisa and a D'Rabbanan, meaning a D'Rabbanan that's under the heading of a D'Oraisa of Lo Sasur. And that goes for Simchas Torah also, that in Eretz Yisrael you just have Shmini Atzeres and and Simchas Torah all the same day in Eretz Yisrael. In Chutz La'aretz, you have a tremendous power of Shmini Atzeres, which is one avenue, one category, one Heichal, and Simchas Torah, which goes into a completely different realm. Now, there is a question that's discussed. What is the mazel for Oder Sheni? We know that every month has a mazel, that the chodesh falls out and is affected by the mazel of that month. I'm not going to go into it, but basically the Arizal says, and he shows how each and every month was affected in the days of the month by what the mazel of that chodesh is. Now, the mazel for Adar is dogim, fish. We know that fish has a special bracha, and that's why Yidden eat so much fish at Seudos, Yom Tov, and Shabbos. Even Shalosh Shudas and Shul, they'll serve some herring because it's fish, and there are three things in Bereshis that were blessed that had a bracha. The Vayavarech Elokim es Yom HaShvi, Shabbos got a bracha. Vayavarech es Ha'adam, and man got a bracha. And it also, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave a bracha to the fish, and that's the reason that no fish died during the mazel, because there was no klola that was able to affect anything in the water. And that's why we use the vehicle of mikveh to be metaher and mezachech ourselves. That when somebody wants to move up a notch in madrega and tahara, so he's mahader in mikveh. The Baal Shem Tov only didn't let 3 days go by without mikveh. Many others don't miss a day without mikveh. But the koyach of the water can bring the bracha, and that's why fish are blessed. And that's the reason why Adar is mazel dogim. But there's a difference of opinion of the Bnei Yissaschar and the Levush. The Levush lived 400 years ago and was the Talmud Muvik of the Ramah, who we paskin in Shulchan Aruch like. So the Bnei Yissaschar says that when you have one Adar that year, it's mazel dogim. What do you do if there's 2 Adars? The first Adar is mazel dogim, and there is no mazel for Adar Sheni, because Adar Sheni is higher than mazel. So says the Bnei Yissaschar. The Levush holds the opposite, that mazel dogim in a year that there's 2 Adars falls into the second Adar, and the first Adar is a continuation of Shavat's mazel dali, which hangs in, which is like an overcast into Adar Rishon. But that's a difference of opinion of many tzaddikim, how Adar Beis is affected. But we see from the discussion how high that it's even above the inyan of mazel. According to many, the Bnei Yissaschar amongst them, that it doesn't need a mazel, that its shoirish is above mazel. It was like when the Mizritcher Magid said to the Balatanya, when he was nifter, that the Mizritcher Magid was dying and the Balatanya was standing there, and the Mizritcher Magid told him who he wanted to take over and be the leader of the movement. He followed the Baal Shem Tov, and he was for 11 years the head. But before he was nifter, he said to the Balatanya that he'd like his son, but he doesn't think the son will ever take it. And he was nifter anyway a few years later. So he said, well, then ask Reb Mendel of Vitebsker, but one thing I don't want you to ask Reb Zusha Meyanapol to become the new leader, because Reb Zusha is a Rebbe is like a Nasi, can be mashpia, and Reb Zusha already is so high in the realm and shoirish neshama of what he has, that he's above Nesias and to be able to be Mashpia, like a Rebbe. So don't ask him to become the Rebbe. And that is Chodesh Adar Sheni, that in its essence, its root is so high that it doesn't have to come on. The other months have to receive the Shefa and the power from the Mazel. And Mazel is not a joke, because the Gemara has a discussion if Klal Yisrael has Mazel or not. One opinion holds no, one opinion holds yes, but Rashi says there on that Gemara that nobody holds that every Yid doesn't have Mazel. Every Yid has Mazel. But what is the difference of opinion? Whether you can change your mazel. And one opinion is you could, one opinion is you can't, and even the one that says you can't admits, Tosfos says, that if it's a schus gadol, and they teach the Mefarshim, what is this schus gadol that you could then change your mazel with? It's tzedakah to Yesoimim and Almanos. That someone does a lot of that, he's able to even change and rectify and go under a different umbrella of mazel. But in any event, we see that that Adar is, and that's how Purim that comes out in Adar Sheni will not be bottled because it's untouchable. It's so high, it's Keser. It's not even Atzilus, it's higher. So every minute of Purim, a person should never waste because he's enveloped in like a mikveh the whole 24 hours. And that's the reason many say that there's a mitzvah to get drunk, because many who are at the Madrega could end up asking for even Tchias HaMesim, and they don't want in Shemayim that they should be able to ask for it, so they get them drunk, and they're half the day drunk. They're not busy asking for anything super ordinary. Now, there is a famous question asked. You know, we have the 5 Sedras that deal. This week's Parsha, by the way, it's one Parsha, Parsha's Vayakhel. It's not Vayakhel Pekude that we stand up and say in unison, Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. That's next week, Parsha's Pekude. But the inyanim of the Mishkan are in all these Sedras. So one of the Mefarshim is curious to know that there was Atzei Shitim. And for instance, it was used in the Bria Chatichon. We know that when all the boards stood up in the Mishkan, there was a hole in every board, and through that hole went a pole. And it was called the Bria Chatichon. Now, when it got to the end of the corner, when it went into every board to hold the board in place, it got to the end of the board, it should have stopped. But miraculously, when they put it in, as Rashi and the Medrash, everyone brings, that it turned left by itself. So it went all the way around through all the holes of all of the Kerushim that were standing, making up the Mishkan. So one of the Mefarshim asks that, where did this Bria Chatichon, the Atzei Shitim, come from? So it says in Medrash that and the Gemara brings it, that Avram Avinu in Be'er Sheva planted the wood that would become the boards, and that they would carve out and make the atzei shitim in the Mishkan. That would be the wood. And he saw Avram Avinu that Klal Yisrael was going to be in Mitzrayim and then go out into the Midbar and then into Eretz Yisrael, and that until Shlomo HaMelech would build Bayis Rishon, there would be the need to have Hashras HaShechina in the Midbar and in Eretz Yisrael, and that they would be able to have that Mokom HaShechina in the Mishkan. Now, they ask, and what happened? When Yaakov Avinu went down to Mitzrayim, he had his sons, the Shiftei, cut down the Atzei Shitim that Avram Avinu planted, and they carried it. They were heavy, the boards. They carried it to Mitzrayim, and when they left Mitzrayim, they took with them the Atzei Shitim, and they made the Bria Chatichon and whatever they needed it for. So the Mefarshim asked the following question: that when Moshe Rabbeinu was about to leave Mitzrayim, he said, wait a second, we promised Yosef HaTzadik we're taking his body, his Aron. So, and he didn't know where it was, so he had to go to Serach Bas Osher, who was the daughter of Osher, and she let Yaakov Avinu know that Oid Yosef Chai, she was playing an instrument, and he gave her a bracha that she would live long, and she lived around 700-800 years. She was still alive during the time of David HaMelech. So Moshe Rabbeinu went to Serach Bas Osher because no one else knew either where the body of Yosef was. And she took Moshe Rabbeinu over to the Nile, the Nilus, and she pointed, here's where they put it in. And he threw in a paper alei shor, and up came the Aron, and they took it with them out of Mitzrayim and subsequently buried him in Shechem, where he's buried till today. Now, so the Mefarshim ask the following: Moshe Rabbeinu took Yosef and was oisik in it, and the people who, and the Torah makes a big deal. It says, Vayikach Moshe Satzmos Yosef imo ki hashbeya hishbiya as bnei Yisrael. They promised Yosef, they made a shvua, and he asked them, Ba'alisem es atzmosai mizet, take my body out of Mitzrayim. And the Medrash talks about it, and it even says that Moshe Rabbeinu, the Medrash, the Mishlei says, Chacham mitzvahs, Chacham Chochmas Yikach mitzvahs. I'm missing one word. Think for a moment and I'll hopefully remember. So and make a big deal about it. Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs, that a smart person will kicha yikach mitzvahs. It's going on Moshe Rabbeinu, because the whole Klal Yisrael was running around Mitzrayim gathering the gold and the silver and everything, and he was busy not doing that, but he was busy just taking the Aron of Yosef. And on that the pasuk says, Chacham leiv yikach mitzvahs. So they ask, you make a big deal about the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu took out Yosef. Why don't they make a big deal about Klal Yisrael, who was running around being Mekayim Mitzvah? HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, take out the gold and silver from Mitzrayim. And they were busy doing it. So the Mefarshim asked, and there's no discussion about the Shiftei Kor who schlepped the Atzei Shitim. That if Moshe Rabbeinu got such credit because he took out the Oren of Yosef HaTzadik, so what about the Shiftei Kor, that they were carrying these heavy boards and trees? They were gigantic. From Avram Avinu till Yetzias Mitzrayim, you were talking about 400 years. As a matter of fact, from Avram Avinu's birth, it was 500 years exactly till they left Mitzrayim. So why no mention of their tremendous thing that they carried out? Avram Avinu planted it and Yaakov cut it down and told them to take it as they go to Mitzrayim. What? No mention of it. So the Mefarshim explain and say that nothing is said about that because they were being Mekayim a mitzvah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them. But Moshe Rabbeinu was Mekayim the Bein Adam Lachavero. And Bein Adam Lachavero in this world sometimes takes even preference to a mitzvah. Because it is a mitzvah, Bein Adam Lachavero. Like the stipler asked it was the Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish asked Reb Chaim Brisker, his Rebbe. He asked and he was offered a kahila of lumdim, and he would be able to open the yeshiva and teach the balabatim, and there'd be so much Torah learning. And the Reb Chaim told him, yes, Torah is beautiful and everything, but you're not allowed to leave over your kahila now because you don't leave over a community. Bein Adam Lachavero, the mitzvah of Bein Adam Lachavero. He was able to learn 10 times more Torah and teach 10 times more Torah in the new place. But there's such a thing as giving preference. You know, there was a story with Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. You know, there's a mitzvah of Birchas Ilonos, that when it comes to the month of Nisan, sometimes it even dips into Iyar, but basically in the month of Nisan, when a fruit tree sprouts forth, you're supposed to make a bracha when you see it. And Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was going home from yeshiva, and he stopped on a street he saw a tree in a yard, and he stopped and he made the bracha, Birchas Ilonos. So somebody came up to him, one of his Talmidim, and says, Rebbe, Al Pi Kabbalah, it's better, it's like a hidur, to make a bracha, Ilonos, on 2 trees. That means if there's 2 fruit trees standing next to each other, 2 separate trees, so there's a hidur. It's not the halacha, but there's a hidur. It's better, the 2, than to make on 1, Al Pi Kabbalah. So the Talmud said to him, you're standing here, you stopped to make a bracha on 1 tree. a block away from here, up the block where you're walking, there are 2 trees. And that's a hiddur. So why are you doing it here? So Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach answered and said, you're right, that there is a hiddur with 2 trees. But look up now, as we're standing here and talking, you see in the window that there's a lady standing there. That lady is an almana. And she enjoys the fact that she thinks I'm special, and that Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach makes the Birchas Ilanos in her yard. Isn't it kedai to put aside the hiddur and give simcha to an almana standing by the window? So we see that the bein adam lachavero sometimes, in other words, it's not mevatel a mitzvah, but if we have a choice, and the Meforshim say that that's the reason there's no big deal made about the Yatzei Shittim, that they carried it and they schlepped it, and it goes to Moshe Rabbeinu because all of the Yidden were busy doing what Hashem wanted to take the money, but meantime they were making themselves filthy rich, very wealthy. So they had a personal gain by what they were doing, even though they were doing the mitzvah atzivui from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But when it came to Moshe Rabbeinu, he had no ulterior motive. He was doing it purely bein adam lachavero, that took the preference. And that's what the Gemara means when we don't have the personal motive of enriching or covet or other things that we are talking about when we take a preference, and that the bein adam lachavero quite often could be more. And don't forget, as heavy as the Oren could have been of Yosef HaTzadik, it wasn't as heavy. The Gemara says it was 22 amas, this Briach HaTichon. So it was 10, that's like, it was long. 32 amas is 64 feet. 64 feet. You can imagine how heavy it was to carry. Yet there's no fuss and no glory given to them about it, but to Moshe Rabbeinu, and to etch into the essence of our very being, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's words of stopping to make a cheshbon. How many people will we benefit and make happy by what we do? Now, I want to say to you that in this week's parsha, it talks about the kior and the kano. The kior and the kano, that they were makadesh, the yadayim and raglayim of the Kohen Gadol. That means they used to wash his hands. The Levium washed his hands, and they poured the water. There was a thing called the kior and the kano, and that's where the water ended up. So when the women came to the Mishkan to fully participate, they wanted to bring their mirrors. And take a look at Rashi, Maros Tzatzovos, the mirrors. And when they came into to Moshe Rabbeinu with all the mirrors, like 5 bushel baskets of mirrors, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "What? You want me to use mirrors? What did you use these mirrors for? You used it to beautify yourself, to put your makeup on, your lipstick, your rouge, or whatever that you put on your face to beautify yourself. I'm not going to put that in the Mishkan." So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, look at Rashi. Chavivin alai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, those mirrors are more beloved to me than all your other gold, silver, and everything that you're putting into the Mishkan. Why was that? Because, is someone here? Why was that? It was because the men had decided they're not having any more children. They said, what are we having children for? They'll be born and they'll start to grow, they'll be thrown in the water and killed. Or if they survive, they're going to end up being thrown into the cement, or they're going to be worked to death like we're being worked to death. So why have children? And the women went down into the fields where the men were sweating and bleeding from the whipping and everything. And they came down very appetizing that the men should want to be with them. And they did. The women succeeded, and more children were born. So there was continuity and hischadshus by Klal Yisrael because of the mirrors. And that's what the Medrash says, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe Rabbeinu, a Klal Yisrael continued to be because of these mirrors, that they beautified themselves, and that prompted the men to want to be with them. And chavivin alai, they're more beloved to me than anything else. And Moshe Rabbeinu used it. Now it says because of this story, and by the women it says throughout Vayakhel, and next week Pekude, Asher Neson Libon, that they were so inspired with a thirst to participate in the Mishkan and bring their gold. And as a matter of fact, the Medrash says, when the pasuk says that Vayaviu, they brought all their jewelry, they were wearing the jewelry. So the Medrash asks, why did they have to wear it? I mean, if they wanted to give 2 of their rings and a bracelet, you put it together in a little bag, or why were they wearing everything? And when they got there, they took it off. And the Chazal say, the reason is because when a person brings it in a bag, you could think maybe this was sitting in a drawer for the last 5 years and they only gave the jewelry that they were not using, that they were not so beloved to and so into. So they wore the jewelry to show that, no, I wear this ring. I use it every day. I use it and I bring forth now, by bringing it, the sign that this is valuable to me. And this is a piece of jewelry that I love and I use. And that's what I'm giving to you. And then they took off the ring. So it was a message to show the level of love of how they brought and what they brought. But it says in Medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because of this whole attitude of the women, because the women by the Egel did not want to give the husbands any of the jewelry. And the husbands, it even says, grabbed off some of the jewelry. They were fighting with the wives, but not by the Mishkan. The level of enthusiasm was greater by the women than by the men. And therefore they got a matana, says the Medrash, of Rosh Chodesh. That means if a man wants to go and sew something on Rosh Chodesh, he's allowed to, but a woman doesn't, because it's considered her Yom Tov. There's certain things, I mean, she could ride in a car, she could answer a telephone, but there's certain things for the Shulchan Aruch brings, because this was a special matana given to the women, so it was specifically it was specifically something which the women did, and they got the reward, and it was something which came in to them straight from the level of love in giving whatever they gave, so they got Rosh Chodesh. But the Mefarshim ask a very good question. Why that matana? In other words, let's say the women were enthusiastic and they jumped forward and they were even as a matter of fact, it says, Vayavo ha'anoshim al hanoshim. Look into the pasuk this week's Sedra, that the men came on the women. So Rashi says, on the women, im anoshim. The men came with the women. So why is such a lashon of al used on the women? So the answer is because the women had so much enthusiasm, they were like the men were following the women. They were like secondary. They were not in first place in terms of this Maisa HaMishkan. The women outdid the men. So they came behind, they came with. On the schus of the women. And that's why it says al. But coming back to our question of why was the gift of Rosh Chodesh specifically given, why not something else? Have women live, all the women, till 120, let them be healthier, let them be this, that. Why the matana, the gift of Rosh Chodesh? So the Shemen HaTov brings, what is Rosh Chodesh? Once the moon goes down, it's pitch black. You don't see any light. And it represents a person who's having tsaros, he gives up his hope. It goes from light down to bad, to worse, to terrible, to... But when he sees Rosh Chodesh, that there's another Levana coming up, oh, there's hope in the world. It's not going to stay dark forever. It's going to become light. That's called hischadshus, renewal, reverberating, rekindling. And since the women brought hischadshus with their mirrors, hischadshus to the development of Klal Yisrael, and there was further growth and further children and further because of the women and what they did. Therefore, the hischadshus of Rosh Chodesh was a very befitting and beautiful matana to give to them in appreciation of their attitude and their enthusiasm. Now, there were two people who were the builders, the architects. The main one was Bezalel. Bezalel was a 13-year, he was just bar mitzvah. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him a special power of Ruach HaKodesh that he was able to put up the Mishkan and be a perfect architect. Why was this done? The Medrash talks about the fact when the Egel was being made, there was one person who stood up, jumped up, Hur, Miriam's son, and jumped up and said to Klal Yisrael, "What are you doing? 40 days ago you were on Har Sinai, the height of heights, of Ruchnius, of Shechina, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now you're making an Egel?" They got up, the Medrash says, and they killed chur on the spot. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu called out and said, I promise that you are going to be remembered in the most magnificent, dynamic way. And his grandson, because it was Bezalel ben Uri ben Hur. So the grandson of Hur was Bezalel, and Bezalel never saw his grandfather. One second, he did see, but it was without his inspiration, so to speak. In other words, he probably, of course, did see him, but it says that even Uri had no influence and input in the power of what Bezalel did and how he flourished with the Mishkan. But he was from Shevet Yehuda, and he perfected the Mishkan, even to a point that Moshe Rabbeinu said that we're going to first make the Kalim. He told him to make all the Kalim and then make the Mishkan. And Bezalel answered him and said, that's not the derech of the world to build Kalim and then the house, the Mishkan. You're not going to build Kalim and leave it outside with rain. But first you have to build the Mishkan and then you build the Kalim. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu said, you know something? You're right. That is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me to do. And on the moment, I forgot. And he indeed went. And it's on that chazal of derech ha'olam, those words, that this whole inyan of the atzei shitim that I told you before, like what's customary, like the examples that I gave you, that the bein adam lachaveru is stronger sometimes than the bein adam lamakom. So anyway, the point I want to bring out to you is that he had an assistant. It doesn't say in the Torah he was an assistant. It sounds as if they were both equal status, but we know that it was on Bezalel that it says, "V'amale oso ruach elokim beruach b'chochma tvuna." The pasuk says on him. But there was someone working with him called Oholiav ben Achisamach lemate don. And the Meforshim are curious if Bezalel was imbued with Ruach HaKodesh and such level of Hashras HaShechina in his mind to be able to build a Mishkan. What do they need Aliyah for? So the Meforshim want to bring out that in Olam Hazeh, that Dibuk Chaverim, which is one of the 49 kinyonim of how to be koine Torah, Dibuk Chaverim, there's such a thing as not living alone on top of a mountain, like the Galochem used to do in solitude, that you're part of a world to uplift the world around you. And you should always have a shutaf. And he had the Ruach HaKodesh, and he had everything from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he completed the mission. But he did together with Aliyah of everything, and he went out of his way, as it says in Chazal, to make sure that he felt he was a full participant with him, completing the Kalim and the Mishkan. Now, why was it these two Shvatim? Yehuda we know because Betzalel was from Yehuda. And Oliav was from Dan. Now we know that Yehuda was the one, Nachshon ben Aminadav Lamate Yehuda, the first one to jump in the water. It was the biggest shevet. It had so much Mesiras Nefesh always in front of Klal Yisrael that when it came to the Mishkan to be dedicated, everyone brought a korban each day. Who was the first one? Nachshon ben Aminadav Lamate Yehuda. So Yehuda had status, and it was the one. It was from Yehuda that they jumped into the sea, and it became the biggest shevet. Who was the most, I would say, put into the negative category? Dan. It says that Dan had pesel micha. Micha made a pesel, an idol, in the midbar, and he was makter ketoiris every day to the Avodah Zorah. And not only he did that, he put the Avodah Zorah right next to the regular Mizbeach HaKetoris so that he should be in the area. He wasn't in the Kodesh, but he was outside, and he placed his incense, the Ketoris, that it should go up in a column mixed together with the real Ketoris. And when it got to Shemayim, it smelled so bad, it was so offensive because there was Avodah Zorah, that the regular Ketoris, HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not have a Nachas Ruach. And the Medrash says that the Malachi Ashoris wanted to come down that first day and kill Micha for doing this. Now, HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't let him kill him because he said he feeds the poor. And he continued doing this all 39 years in the Midbar, and he continued it into Eretz Yisrael when it was in Shiloh. So, and when Dan traveled, there were 3 shvatim to the right, to the left, to the front, to the back. He was put in the back, and the Anan that protected them, that there were 3 shvatim. So the first 2, Naphtali, together with, not Asher, the other one was Naphtali, and I'll think of it in just a moment, and Dan. Those were the 3 in the back. So Dan was at the tail end because the Anan didn't want to cover over him and protect him the same way. And when it rained, and it didn't touch the other Yidden, but it touched him because he had Pesel Micha with him. So Betzalel wanted and was happy at HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, work with Oliav. Show Achdus Yisrael. You're from the most glorified and best Shevet, Yehuda. You pair up and partner with Oliav, who's from Shevet Dan, who is the most derogatory and negative placed Shevet, to show that all of Klal Yisrael is together one unit. Now the pasuk opens the Sedra, Vayakhel Moshe as Bnei Yisrael, Kol Hadas Bnei Yisrael, Vayomer Aleim Eila Hadvarim Asher Tziva Hashem Lasos Osam. And when you start the Sedra, and the pasuk I just said, and you go to Sheni, the last pasuk is Vayetzu, after Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to Klal Yisrael and told over. See, usually when a pasuk begins in most Sedra, it's Vayadaber Hashem el Moshe Lemor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe, and the Lemor was that you should give it over to Klal Yisrael. Over here, it was the same speaking. And it was a message from Hashem, but it doesn't say Vayidaber Hashem. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. It just says Vayakhel Moshe. So the Medrash says, why does it say the word Vayakhel? Because it wants to tell you that the Mishkan was partial, a kapara for the Maisa of the Egel. That when it says Vayakilu by the Egel, Vayakilu, the same word, Al Aaron, that they got up in protest against Aaron, so it says Vayakilu. So this parsha begins with the word Vayakhel to tell you that it was a kapara for that Vayakilu. And that's why it doesn't say Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, but it says Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael vayomer aleim ela advarim, and that's why that lashon is used. But after he got done telling them about Shabbos and about the Mishkan, about bringing the actual, putting every last drop of gold that they needed and everything else, at the end of the speech, the pasuk says that Vayetzu kol adas b'nei Yisrael, that Klal Yisrael went back milifnei Moshe. That means they were all standing there listening to the speech, and when he finished the speech, they all went home. So the Mefarshim asked, why do you have to tell them that they went home? What do you think? After the speech, they were going to stand there for the next 5 years? The speech was over. So what was there to stand there for? So why do you have to tell us that they left milifnei Moshe? So the answer is that the Mefarshim say, and it's such an important message to all of us. When they got done hearing the speech, it wasn't just they heard the speech and goodbye. They were leaving milifnei Moshe, that there was such a unbelievable yiras hakavod, and how he was speaking to them, that they were never the same piece of people. Vayetzu, yeah, they went back home, but they went back home milifnei Moshe, that they were standing right next to Moshe, and they were so inspired, so imbued with him, and so uplifted that it made an impression for the rest of their lives. And that's why it says milifnei Moshe. When we have friends and we're part of a community, like the Gemara says that one of the Tanoim was offered 1,000,000 golden, it says elef alfei, 1,000 times 1,000 golden coins, till he should move to a community. And he said, no, that's not a Torah community. I don't care how much money you're going to offer me, I'm not moving there. The influence of people, when you're in a group, you see it by kids, you can have 6 boys together, 20 years old, and one says, you know what? Remember yesterday we saw that family that needed food? Let's go buy food and bring it over to them. Okay, so the 5 will follow if the leader, if the person who is giving them an idea in a way that they're going to want to join him. So that's the influence of having a leader that is like that will influence and uplift others. And you can have people that you sit with, the first thing they sit down, well, did you hear what happened to Moshe this morning? He came into the Beis Medrash and he gave a punch to Shimon. I mean, is that what you want to hear and be influenced by and near and up? The milifnei Moshe. And that's why it says that leadership doesn't mean when a leader, he could just sit down and learn and do his mitzvahs and give his tzedakah, but he's not given the talent of leadership to keep it to himself. Yes, it's tiring and it's bothersome and it's not easy, 100%. but it is not the tafkid and tachlis in someone to come to Olam Hazeh and to keep his talents to himself. He's given talents to influence and uplift his surroundings. And we have to think for a moment, we're going to this meeting. What can I add to that meeting? When they ask everyone their opinion, what am I going to say? Some nonsense to make everyone laugh? Or am I going to say something that will make an impression out of the 50 people sitting there, maybe to just one? But maybe that was your mission. You know that tzaddikim said, big tzaddikim, chaverim of the Bnei Yissaschar, that his whole tafkid, he wrote 19 Sfarim. So, and one of the Sfarim of the 19 is called Bnei Yissaschar. So why is he called Bnei Yissaschar? There's other names on all the other Sfarim. Why was that one that stuck to him and that he's referred to in the world as the Bnei Yissaschar? It's only one of the 19. But the answer is that tzaddikim said that they saw that his shoyrish neshama, he was sent down to Olam Hazeh to write the Bnei Yissaschar. And you see today the far-reaching effect, one of the most famous, drenched with Kabbalah and Kisvei Ari, and the most beautiful chidushim and divrei Torah on the Chadoshim and the Yomim Tovim. So let us strengthen ourselves with the resolve that this upcoming week and Purim and Pesach, we're going to use our talents that we have to be able to uplift others. Have a wonderful week. A guten Chodesh, haba aleinu l'toiva, Shabbos mevorachim. Kol tov.